Welcome to Compassion Speak. These podcasts explore spiritual and self-care topics, adding wisdom, creative ideas, and strategies to play with, to increase your options and explore how to show up in a way that is new. My name is Allison. I'm a medical intuitive, a chaplain, and a spiritual teacher at Journey Within in Lakewood, Colorado. This is my co-host, Cleo. She is a light worker, a glass artist, and as my student, has offered to take a deep dive into emerging gifts and talents. Welcome, Cleo.
June 18th, 2022, and our topic is how we show up when we need to work with the angels.
Awesome. Well, I would like to start with this wonderful invitation of being able to ask for our heavenly assistance, and whether we call them spirit guides or angels, or other forms of, or other vocabulary words. We have a wonderful support system already in place. We may not realize it's going on, but anything that we create with attracts attention from beyond. And when we add a spiritual layer to what's going on and want to include them at a deeper level, we start recognizing that how we show up really does change who we have access to in being able to work with. And I like the idea of ethics around it, because oftentimes I've noticed my interaction with my angels very similar to the boundaries and ethics that I go through with my humans. So oftentimes it will mirror each other. Like the lessons that I'm learning in the physical world will also be similar to the lessons I'm learning in the spiritual domain. So how I show up really does affect my interaction with the angels, as well as who I have access to. If I'm in a fear-based experience, then I'm going to be attracting that type of assistance. So if I want to rob a bank, there are angels that can help me do it better. But I may not want to move in that direction, and it may require me taking some time on my own to raise my vibration and to seek a better support for where I would like to go instead.
I love that. I love the angels who will help you rob a bank. I think this is something that, in a way, everyone takes for granted, and in a way, people dismiss that they are doing it all the time. The people, they're looking for a parking spot and they say, "Oh, Jesus, find me a parking spot." And then they find a parking spot and they park. And they might think that to ask at that time is somehow ridiculous or silly, or to believe that divine assistance is so easy to access is impossible. And yet these are exactly the ways that the angels work. We ask, they support us, and it really is that easy to communicate in our direction from us to them as just asking. And I think so many times I talk to people who are getting information from their spirit guides, and they find it so easy to dismiss. They might think that it's their imagination. They might think that they're making it up. And I always tell my students when I teach a class, the first thing I always say is, we grew up with Scooby-Doo. Even in children's cartoons in our society, it's not cool to believe in angels. It's cool to think that anything that could possibly be a ghost is just a carnival man in a mask.
So we're off to see the wizard.
So we are off to see the wizard, and it's something that our society really needs to make space for. The idea that we have been doing this all along. The idea that We have been contacting our spirit guides all along and relying on them all along, and very much hand in glove with them, and not recognizing it.
And I think we can identify some easier transitions when we already see it at work. You know, it may be in an area that we may discount as being wrong or bad or what we struggle with. However, it has its own design and purpose already in play. And if we can appreciate that better, then we have something substantial to spring forward with, to engage or increase our willingness to participate.
So give me an example. What's an example of this showing up in an area that we might consider
Well,
to be
the
bad?
alcoholic driving home and getting home safely.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay, there's angels involved with that, right? We may say that that is a behavior that is undesirable, and we may criticize that. However, it does have its own design already working. And so when we look at the areas of our lives that we need to improve upon or to change or to perhaps move in a different direction altogether, if we can appreciate what we're not doing well and see how that is already functioning, it's easier to make transitions and cleaning up bad practices because you can identify smaller steps in getting where you need to go. And so by moving from, let's say, that alcoholic made it home and the next morning was surprised that it made it home safely and feels regret, and that moves into determination to make some changes, and he reaches out for some support, and that raises the consciousness, that raises the vibration, and as that continues to ascend, you also have access to different help in that vibration. So in that energy band, you have the angels that work with those conditions. And so as we raise our vibration, we have access to different ones. And so that's kind of how I have noticed it in my practice, is that there are some days I cannot work with certain angels because of how I am showing up. And to value that, because oftentimes how I am showing up is balancing who I am, who I have access to connect with, to support or encourage, because now I'm on that same level of empathy that can relate to what's going on, because I'm vibrating at that level. I'm matching that energy, right? And so if I want to work, let's say, doing some healing work, that may be on a higher level of frequency than the reading aspect of gathering information intuitively. So the more that I spend time attuning to myself, raising my consciousness, doing my self-care practices, and eliminating what we know as stinking thinking, the types of thought patterns that are in those lower fear-based vibrations, the concerns and criticisms that keep us locked in that. If we let it go and we continue to feed ourselves with experiences that nurture and that edify where we want to go, then we can go from, let's say, a mistake into a really good finish on making things right. And I think making things right is a practice of raising your consciousness. And it doesn't require participation outside of you. And at the same time, it can draw that assistance to you.
This is interesting. Somehow I always picture making things right as being something where it definitely requires the other person. Like this making things right is that, for me, that moment where I fit the puzzle together and they're finally able to accept whatever it is. I'm trying to really collaborate with my angels in projects, and the constraints that they're putting on me are very frustrating. They're confusing. I'm constantly bumping into showing up thinking I did it. I'm showing up in great shape. Everything's ready. Everything's wonderful to work now. And invariably, it doesn't work out. And I'm left with this sense that I can never make this right, that I've done everything that I can do and I can never make this right, and that somehow there's some element that I am not supplying so that they can finish their puzzle. I feel like my puzzle's finished and I feel like I'm showing up with a complete puzzle, and somehow it doesn't, either it doesn't mesh with theirs, or there's some piece that's still missing that I don't even know what it is, that I've never even recognized that I'm walking around not having. And it is invariably I can never make things right.
One thing I like to encourage is this idea of that equal partnering with spirit guides and angels. I love this idea that we have something to teach our angels have something to teach us. That's why we're drawn together, because we complement the other in how we show up and how we participate in the challenges that we face and the virtues that come from that, the fruit of our labor. And I think it's interesting that when we come up against working with a specific personality type or functioning, when I'm working with Michael, Archangel Michael, there's a higher level of standard. The rules in working with Michael feel much more constructive. They're not rigid, but they're structured in such a way that you get decisiveness, you get motivation, you get action, you get results. And that requires being able to follow the structure that's being laid out. And if I can't arrive at that agreement, then I'm going to hit myself against that proverbial rock wall. Mm-hmm. And, I think a more gentler approach is to back off that, do more self-care, self-edification, and arriving prepared to follow the rules of engagement in working with Michael, or work with someone else. So, it's like with relationships. You treat one friend differently than you treat another friend, based upon preferences, based upon their interests, or how they like to be treated. And so you know that around Joe, you don't say certain things because he may be more sensitive to that. Where working with Jim, he wants you to be more direct, Mm-hmm. So I think that we do these role playings, that there's a lot of mirroring that goes on to what is going on inside of me. And that also helps me show up. So what I'm getting in response to working in partnership with a specific angel changes who I am and the desire of showing up in a different way. This allows me to work on a specific project with them that feels different than working with another angel in a different area. Does that make sense?
It does. I wish they were quite so flexible with me. They haven't been willing to accept anything short of like a very rigid schedule. And it's...
Well, there doesn't seem to be a lot of negotiating involved. It's like them telling you what to do. And
No. I set up this schedule in an attempt to come up with. I mean, so before I would have, work really successfully with 2 angels in one day, and the next day there's 3 that are all upset that I didn't work with them yesterday. And it's like, I'm, like, why aren't they okay with that? And it doesn't matter how hard I work with any of them. There's 2 that got left out, and that are, sad and feel neglected and whatever. I'm like, why do you feel neglected? You are a freaking angel. You should be okay with this. You know that I'm busy. You know that I've been working on this. You know that I'm gonna work with you eventually. You know what is your problem? And they're just like, we don't have any idea what it is you're gonna want, what it is you need, or what it is, or when we're gonna work with you. And so I was like, okay, fine, I will make a schedule. Show up on this day. They were like, excellent, we love that. Still doesn't work.
It sounds like you're learning a lot in the process.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of self-revelation that's coming up in your dialogue with them. And, we work these things out because we have relationships and they're important.
It's a really powerful eye-opener to realize how, what it is that I think part of what the angels are always wanting is exactly what all these, what all everybody talks about manifesting. The reason that they talk about all these different, emotional and physical constraints on what your energy needs to do in order to be manifesting in a positive way, that is also exactly what the angels align with, and that's why you're able to manifest things when you show up in the right way, have the right attitude, announce what your preferences are, stick to that, and keep it regular. All of those things are exactly, whether you can whether you can hear the angels or not, whether you feel like they're there or not. If you do those things, they are interfacing with you. And they are able to work with you, whether or not you know that it's happening or not. And so it's very interesting to see how many times those kinds of requirements come up over and over again. I'm here, it's time, we're on schedule, I'm on schedule, you're on schedule. Why won't you work with me today? Well, because you're not in joy. What do you mean I'm not in joy? I'm like, this is work. Can't we work? Oh no, this is not like homework or like a chore that you have to do. If you are not showing up in joy, I cannot interface with you. We don't manifest our highest good and these beautiful, amazing, wonderful things when we show up thinking, in muck boots and overalls with buckets, right? I mean, I love that. I think that that's great, but they don't. They don't like that. They don't want that energy. They don't enjoy that for some reason.
Well, and perhaps there's a level of engagement that when we rise in consciousness and get out of the ego in the way things have to look or function or be. The communication and the partnering is less effort, less questioning. Like there are times that I feel as though I am. It's like 1 + 1 = 2, and this sentence goes like this, and where it's a lot more third dimension in aspect to how my brain is wrapping myself around the experience. It's more ego based, whether it's performance or healing or forgiveness. There's that level of participation that is more analytical, like what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then at times when you shift to a higher level of consciousness and trust, you find yourself doing without really the analog, the analytical process. Right.
Yeah, right. I get you.
Where it's you're in the flow, you're not in the thought process of it. You're trusting the words that come, and at the same time, it doesn't feel so laborious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about your relationship with the angels is that there is a lot of teamwork. There's a lot of negotiating that goes on. There's a lot of support, and there's also a lot of investigation on how they show up for you and how you show up for them, you know.
Well, I'm out of my depths. This is it. That's it. That's as I cannot figure this out. I don't have any idea what I am doing wrong.
Well, maybe you're not doing anything wrong.
Well, they definitely tell me every single time that I'm doing something wrong, so...
Yeah. Well, I have seen value come from so many different experiences that sometimes in the areas that I get stuck in, allowing myself to be there can be really challenging. And so maybe I need to explore a little bit more grace or find intentions or emotions that support where I am at. Bringing angels in from other areas that can support you and help you along as you are working towards the expectations of the other angels.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
And my voice is clouding over because I am to pay attention to what is coming up. And so continue to talk and I'll let you know what comes up.
Okay. So yeah, I think we've both had the experience where if we're not focusing very hard on keeping ourselves clear and open when we're doing readings for people, that sometimes that the spirits that show up are not necessarily spirits that have the highest good in mind, or they might be spirits that are, in so much pain. It doesn't really matter what they think the highest good is. They don't know. They don't understand because they're in so much pain that they don't have good information to offer, or they don't have any healing to offer or guidance to offer. And in fact, those spirits are showing up because they need healing and they need attention. And sometimes it's very helpful for those spirits to be there as a mirror of what our client needs or what we need, that this is something that has been ignored and not paid attention to. I certainly find that, I see a lot of different spirits, and I just recently ran into one who is very, very different from the ones I normally work with. And the ones I normally work with, I would say, are very much air elements. You don't really feel that sort of heaviness going on in the body when working with them. They're very, very light and very soft and very gentle and very understanding and kind and patient. And I just made contact with somebody who wants to work with me very, very much. And they are very different. They're very earthy. And so the feeling of working with them is very, very heavy. They're very, very powerful, and that's kind of exciting. But it's so interesting to work with a spirit who is demanding and not necessarily patient or open. Somebody who is very full of their own importance and their own agenda. And even something like, hey, you want to help me with a reading? And this spirit will say, I am not interested in that. This person is not worth my time. And it's just like, wow, that is something I've never, ever heard one of my angels say. They would never say, oh, this person is not worth my time. All people, all entities, all beings are deserving of compassion and attention and patience. And so it's really baffling to find myself attracting spirits who have sort of more of a difficult attitude. One of the things that came up in trying to work with that spirit was this recognition that I absolutely always had to put my foot down in the hugest way, sort of like working with a toddler or something, that there had to be boundaries which were not negotiable. With my angels, it's very easy to be flexible, and it's very easy to change the plan or do something different or things like that. Usually they're not very upset about that. They always recognize that whatever is going on is for the best and that we can work things out. And this spirit is, very demanding and very rigid. And it's so interesting to recognize maybe this is the skill that I'm lacking in working with my very soft angels. Maybe my very soft angels are not able to get me to have the response that I need to have of having harder boundaries, more aggressive boundaries, and having more aggressive demands on my own instead of constantly expecting them to be directing the flow of how things are going to go or what we're going to work on. And so, in a way, I think even when it appears that we're drawing to ourselves maybe something that might be of a lower vibration or of a very different energy that maybe we can kind of recognize might not be our flavor in the long term, it might actually be exactly who we need now. And who knows what doors that will open.
Right. Well, think about a scenario where, let's say that there is a family that is not getting along. Okay. And at one level, maybe the partner is feeling invalidated or not valued for something that they're doing. Okay. And depending upon their vibration, depending upon their thought process, it may be important to criticize the other partner. At a higher vibration, not paying attention to the behavior may be a solution. So I find value in each one of those different options. There may be a different outcome or a different consequence depending upon a behavior that I may choose to engage. And that I may want to consider it longer so that I have more options to choose from. And it requires me to raise my vibration, my consciousness, to a place where I can access more options. If I'm stuck in a fear-based model, then it makes sense to criticize, for self-protection, for self-exposure, to try to make a connection from that criticism and draw the other person closer to reconnect. Now, if I'm in a higher vibration, it's going to look much different. So that's where I like to use the word appreciate, because then you can start looking at why things function the way they do. And through that appreciation, you can identify the changes that are the changes and transitions that are also available.
I love how skilled you are at appreciating everything. I think even when we work hard at, finding an enlightened space for ourselves, it's very easy to take the vibration model of understanding, that some behaviors are of low vibration and some behaviors are of a higher vibration and all these things. It's very easy to look at that thermometer and just totally label it as this down here is bad and this up here is good. And I love how you are so blessed with this incredible ability, which I hope I learned from you, this ability to not do that, to not judge it, to say they're all part of our beautiful experience, and one leads to the other, and you can't really walk the journey if you're not going to accept each of the stepping stones on the way. And I love that. I love how beautifully you're able to talk about the skills that we develop even in super toxic situations that then become tremendous virtues, instead of rejecting your tremendous virtues, saying, well, I only got that because of this terrible situation and therefore it must be bad, which I have run into many people who actually will do that.
Well, and when we're talking about showing up, it is in how I show up that grants me access. And when we talked about making things right, when you're around a group of people that criticize how you arrive, and they don't want you to make it better, they want you to feel bad about the experience. That's where the conflict can come from within that. That's where we can get stuck, because one pushes off of the other. But by me showing up and making it right is an inward journey, or as an inward journey, then I can focus on what I have control over, change who I am presenting, and support it with my integrity, with my actions, with my words, and continue to work on that process. It may not be with the same group of people. That may not be where the solution lies. You can take that new direction, that new purpose, to the people who are ready.
This is really interesting. Can you give me an example of exactly that. People who feel bad, who do not want it to be better, are trying to get you to experience what they're experiencing, and then you're able to change that.
Yeah, I can speak from my own experience that I grew up in a family where the solution was not necessarily the focus. That there was a belief that it would not get better, therefore you were to endure it. So when you felt bad enough, long enough, then you were paying value to what was being devalued earlier. Does that make sense?
Oh, painfully so. Yes.
So the solution is not fixing it or trying to dissolve it so it doesn't happen again. The belief is it will continue the way it is. That is just the way things are. So me feeling bad enough, long enough, granted me access to grace and forgiveness. When in a different group of people, you coming up with a really good solution and it being filled with responsibility and ownership, that would be the end result or the desired result.
It's so interesting. There's so many ways that we run into our family members and they're not interested in feeling better. They're interested in us feeling as bad as they do. It just happens all the time. It's really fascinating that that sense of, in a way, that we don't want to be better. Like, what is that?
And over the years, my family has grown considerably in skills. And so now there's a lot of focus being placed on creating really good systems and solutions and supporting and encouraging each other moving in that direction. And earlier in life, there was a value to having that mirror of I'm in pain and you're in pain, so it validates my pain being real. That is tremendously important. And if we don't have the ability to experience that younger in life, it's going to be sought out in our present day, and we'll be seeking it out in the future as well.
I guess it's part of the whole understanding of what it is to be seen and heard, and that we really can't let go of our stories unless we truly feel that someone has witnessed our pain.
Isn't that a beautiful idea of empathy? And yet a healthier version of that would be able to observe it, to know it, and to validate it, because if you were in their position, you would do exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. That way it's more efficient and you're not bogged down by the energy consumption that experience requires. Mm-hmm. You can be more neutral to it. And very much like first aid, the number one part about being first aid is not becoming a victim yourself. So you have to be okay before you extend the olive branch, mm-hmm. before we reach out to each other. If it can start from the inside and then reach out, it's a much more stable position to lead with.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's, you've talked very beautifully about matching someone's energy in order to give them that sense of validation, and yet not being pulled into that experience, not allowing their energy to be the only thing that you can see, so that you can then sort of hold that experience that they're having, which you are mirroring, in sort of a container, let's say, of compassion. I think
this came up recently, and I thought that would be a really good example to bring it up again. Earlier in the week, I was working with someone, and I noticed that there was an opportunity to place an experience in a box and protect it, kind of contain the experience so that I could find proximity. So the other person that I was helping could find proximity. So as I was describing this, I was also encouraging to bless what it is that feels like it needs to be contained or be pushed away. That it would be easy to criticize that experience because it's invalidating to me. However, if I bless it with what I desire to experience, it no longer has control over me. I have control over Sean, and it's free to develop the way it needs to develop because I can't control it. And so that balance of harmony is what I am offering myself first as I bless the box, bless the container of the experience that may be filled with conflict. It changes how I show up, and it brings up a lot more options to draw from.
So are you describing an experience where you chose to allow the box to be, sometimes we talk about people who choose to amputate an experience, or sometimes we talk about taking a story and putting a new frame on it, right? Reframing things so that the image is different. The way that we react to even the same story has a completely different resonance. Are you talking about keeping the box? It's so funny, like you're talking about, well, somebody wanted to just protect this whole thing and keep it in a box, and I decided to accept that. Like, are you describing like literally keeping the box instead of saying, there's something in this box, and if we literally open the lid, it will be fine. You can just, it will fly away, the stuff that's in there.
And that's one option. And you can see that when you allow yourself to arrive to the place where that's accessible. The practice of blessing the box is allowing it to be what it is without the feeling that the box is controlling me.
Oh.
I am in harmony with the box, and it's not that I agree with what's going on in the box. It's that I need to feel supported and encouraged and loved and accepted. And I offer that to the box because that is my need. And in order for someone else to identify that, it's a quality that represents me well.
Gotcha. I hear that. I get that.
I love the option of opening the box because oftentimes when you look at things, it's not as bad as you thought they were, especially when you give yourself to explore different options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's so interesting as part of the whole people needing to be seen and heard in order to be able to move on. The idea that, we put something in a box to protect ourselves from it, to protect this experience, and in a way lose sight of what the whole thing was actually about. And the idea that, we can function all over again because we've got it isolated. But the minute that we bring it back out, it's almost a changed thing because our own perspective is so different. The story that we've told about why this thing has to be hidden is so different from the truth. And so we go to open the box and we can't see the truth. There's a monster in there, you know.
Yeah, and the monster may receive the blessing well. And as you bless that box, you begin to add to it the experiences that were not available at the time that the things were put in the box. The story was written at a point of wounding where it was short-sighted in its full expression. Yeah. And now that it's being added to with empathy, with support, with understanding, with love, compassion, now it's a lot more balanced expression, a fuller expression of what, of where we began.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, like this idea of I lost my idea. It had to do with exactly this, your appreciation of all these incredible difficult situations that we standardly walk around beating ourselves up for, or labeling, or being traumatized by and never being able to let go of. And I love how you always talk about appreciating those things. And even in this way, even when I'm struggling to make my relationship with the angels work, you're still in appreciation of it all. No matter what it looks like, no matter how goofy or whack or distorted or how much I'm so baffled, you're like, yeah, you're learning good stuff. This is important.
Well, and I'm just looking at the level of skill that you have achieved since I've known you. And I remember a time when we were doing a reading at the school where I teach, and one of your spirit guides came in and was creating a problem. Turning on and off lights, on and off music. you know the one I'm talking about.
Yes.
Well, think of all the other assistants, all the other angels that you have worked with between then and now, and how much of a broader range of appreciation you have for each of the skills of what they bring to the table. You may not work with this person, this entity, as much, or it may be with a different way of showing up, a different level of authority, right?
Yeah.
But your ability to work with a variety of experiences has grown so much because of your willingness to show up in a different way.
Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that. I am feeling so outclassed by my partners right now. That is really helpful to think about that. It's always fascinating. I think you and I are people who have changed so much in our lifetime. I think there are some people who don't change that much. And I think they learn a lot, but I think that in a lot of ways, you and I have changed so much in our lifetime, who we are, what our skills are, how we show up, who we're able to work with. We've changed so much, it's hard to look back. And sometimes it's frightening to look back because the contrast is so tremendous that it can be invalidating to our progress. It can be like, there's no way I could possibly be out of that experience. How could I, that must still be here. And yet to appreciate, yes, no, it's true. I really have changed that much. No, it's true. It's okay. I can change that much. I think sometimes it baffles our beliefs The idea that how can somebody change so much in one lifetime and be so different? And yet we have to allow that, yeah, it's true, and remind ourselves even, yes, it's true. It's okay. It's a good thing. It's a marker of, this too is just one more stepping stone in that journey.
I also think that it's a wonderful opportunity to be in front of someone and representing their higher self. There is a lot of reverence, a level of appreciation, of compassion, of recognition that has you looking at someone's future self to encourage where they are right now. And oftentimes it will feel dissonant because they're in a different frequency when it's meant to be a carrot. It's meant to be a North Star. It's meant to help them arrive to the place. I remember one time a while back, I was holding space for a group of students doing a reading, and the person didn't like the information that was being shared, got up out of frustration or upset, and left the building. And I left as well to make sure things were okay. And that same person came back like a year and a half later and said everything that they were talking about came true. It was like they could see my future, and I didn't believe it was real. And so, there are often times that we don't recognize our fuller self because of the dissonance that we are feeling right now, or the invalidation of the fuller self compared to where we are today. And so if we can look at dissonance between each other inside, it's like a house divided against itself will surely fall, right? That's not necessarily within a family or an organization. It's also internally, that if I'm in conflict with myself, it's going to take me out. And so being able to broaden our context to include more of who we are when we are not feeling, when we're feeling invalidated or insecure. It's like those are isolating, important moments to be recognized. And then we can grow from that. When we're in that place of the wound, that we need to treat it with care. We need to do some triage and make sure it has a very nurturing environment to get to a place of wellness, so that we can expand or contract or value right where we're at. Because from the place of the victim, there's no other life outside of the wound. And so we must stay in that cocoon until our wings are ready to break through that cocoon and we're ready to fly to our next destination.
I remember you in guided meditations offering to clients to see their future self, 10 years from now, and ask that future self to come back and talk to them. And the most amazing things coming from that. I remember seeing people who were suddenly able to witness how much they were going to grow from the experience they were going through, and also how much they were going to benefit, how powerfully they could be in this world if they could just let go of thinking that this, whatever it is they're experiencing, was so cataclysmic. And, it's so interesting because so much of our work focuses on, angels and angel assistance, or relationships and relationship, getting our relationship contracts sort of it to a place of integrity and a place of great functioning. And yet the idea that your future can communicate with you as powerfully and as beautifully as your past can, because it's pretty obvious we're all walking around with our pasts telling us all kinds of stories, and jumping in when we least expect it, when we get triggered. So this is very beautiful, the idea of our future self, someone who sees the outcome of all of what we're going through, that this is someone who we can ask for assistance from.
Yeah, so hold that thought and hold that emotion, okay? When my voice clouded over, the indication was for me to observe and to be with the experience so that I could see things coming together. Mm-hmm. So earlier in the podcast, you were describing your interactions with the angels and some of the frustration that came from being on different pages. Mm-hmm. Now, what if those angels represent your guidance from your future self and are encouraging, trying to get you to that place of development later down the road? And so the dissonance that you're feeling now is your inability to do what they're asking you to do. And if we were to switch that to appreciating, that seems to be a theme today, appreciating what's going on, then it shifts how we use that information. So instead of it being a criticism, I'm not there yet, I can't do what you're asking me to do. It's like, show me how to develop this. You're offering this to me, and I want to step into it. So what do I need to do to change how I show up so that I can learn what you are offering?
Yeah.
And I'm complete with that.
Thank you. Thank you. I so appreciate that. I think it's been really fantastic watching you offer readings in our online Facebook group, Wisdom of the Angels, because it's so cool to see. I had a friend who I asked to allow you to give her a reading, and she did quite happily. And she is a very advanced, beautiful, lovely, spiritual, enlightened being, and I am so eager for you to meet her at some point. And she had just come back from like a giant spiritual retreat, and so I really thought that this reading might be mostly information from before her retreat. But when I talked to her, because it matched very much what she had told me was going on with her before the retreat. And yet when I talked to her, this expression came over her face of wonder, and she said, I am quite certain that I don't understand anything that Sean told me, because it is all stuff that I have not learned yet. And I am very eager to discover it all over the next 6 months. She was very serious, and I could see that she knew very, very well what she was talking about, that those words really pinged her on things that she really did want to be aware of and want to be in touch with, and that she could feel her resistance keeping her away from it, and yet she knew that all of that would come soon if she allowed it to.
Yeah, I think that sometimes working with the angels is helping us identify what we know to be true because we resonate with it. We may not understand it, but we can see ourselves in the information. It's like a timeless photograph of what has already happened, even though I'm just now stepping into it.
Yeah.
And what a courageous place to be. At one level, the reading could be invalidating or, let's say, incorrect. On a different frequency, it's filled with your capacity and with goals and with a new way of showing up that has a lot of benefits and rewards and treasures involved.
I love that. That is awesome. And this, my friend, is a great note to end on, I think.
Well, in all of your interactions with the angels, recognize where you are right now and say, thank you for assisting me. Where would you like to go? And how would you like for me to show up? And so it is. Thank you for joining us today on Compassion Speak. I want to thank Michael Allison for doing such a wonderful job editing these podcasts. For you, the listener, for your topics and ideas that help us explore wisdom, spiritual gifts, and self-care strategies. Please post your ideas on the Compassion Speak Facebook page and on Instagram. All right. Until next time, put into motion the changes you wish to experience from an intimate universe. God bless, and angels all around you.